On a quiet April night in 1990, a young woman was found unconscious on a lonely Oklahoma highway. She died days later, her identity a mystery. A man claimed she was Tanya Hughes, his wife, but nothing added up. Her death revealed a chilling saga of abuse, secrets, and a stolen identity, just the first piece of a terrifying puzzle. Her name was Shannon or Tanya, maybe even Suzanne, no one was quite sure. The woman who died in that Oklahoma hospital in 1990 had lived under so many names, her true self was erased. Her family was built on lies, orchestrated by Clarence Hughes, a man with no past, hiding a terrible secret. This was no accident, it was a web of stolen identities and control, a life stolen before it ever began. The death of Tanya Hughes was the catalyst. It was the event that finally shone a light into the dark corners of her life, revealing a reality far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Her passing left behind a grieving little boy, a mysterious man claiming to be his father, and a cascade of unanswered questions that would baffle law enforcement for more than 3 decades. Today, we delve into the chilling and heartbreaking story of the woman who came to be known as the girl in the picture. It is a case that spirals from a supposed hit and run into a labyrinth of kidnapping, systemic abuse, cold-blooded murder, and the haunting search for a stolen identity. The central question was, and remains, utterly haunting. Who was this girl, really? How did her life become a twisted odyssey of fear and deception, lived out under the watchful eye of a dangerous predator? Her story is a stark reminder of how easily a person can disappear, not by vanishing from the face of the earth, but by having their very identity stripped away, layer by layer, until nothing of their true self remains. She was a daughter, a sister, a mother, but for most of her life she was a captive, forced to play a role in a script written by her abuser. Her journey is a testament to the darkest depths of human cruelty. The investigation would reveal that the man calling himself Clarence Hughes was, in fact, Franklin Delano Floyd, a career criminal and a fugitive with a violent and terrifying past. He was a master of manipulation, a chameleon who changed his identity as easily as he changed his clothes. And the woman he called his wife, Tanya, was his captive. He had kidnapped her as a small child, raising her as his own daughter before forcing her into the role of his wife. Her entire life was a lie he had constructed, a prison from which there was no escape. The little boy, Michael, was her son, but he was also Floyd's pawn in a sick and twisted game. This is not just a story about a crime, it is a story about the failures of a system designed to protect the vulnerable. It is a story about the people who saw that something was wrong but did not know how to help. And ultimately, it is a story about a young woman named Suzanne Marie Savakis, whose life was stolen but whose memory has been reclaimed through the relentless pursuit of truth. Her case forces us to look at the faces in the crowd and wonder what secrets they hold, and it challenges us to solve the mysteries that hide in plain sight. It is a story that once heard is impossible to forget. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, she was known as Tanya Hughes, a quiet young mother working as an exotic dancer but always reserved and withdrawn. Her world revolved around her son Michael and her much older, controlling husband Clarence. Clarence managed every part of her life, isolating her and keeping her dependent. Tanya's past was a mystery. No friends, no family, just a haunting absence, as if she were a ghost among the living. Tanya Hughes and her family lived on the fringes, moving from one low-rent apartment to another, never staying long enough to settle. Clarence controlled every dollar she earned, keeping her isolated and dependent. At the Tulsa Gentlemen's Club, Tanya remained an outsider, her life a blur of cheap motel rooms and smoky clubs, trapped under Clarence's suffocating control, invisible to the world. Clarence Hughes was a man of contradictions, a charming husband yet a controlling phantom who existed only in the present. His charm was a mask, hiding a cold, manipulative nature. He isolated Tanya, disguising possessiveness as protection. Clarence Hughes was a fabrication, one of many aliases used by Franklin Delano Floyd, a career criminal hiding in plain sight. The man in the shadows was far more dangerous than anyone knew. Despite the walls Clarence built, Tanya's fear seeped through. She whispered her terror to trusted friends, dreaming of escape with her son Michael. But Clarence's control was suffocating, and every exit led to a dead end. When she became pregnant again, her desperation grew. She planned to run, but never made it out. On April 25, 1990, Tanya Hughes was found unconscious and severely injured on the shoulder of Interstate 35 in Oklahoma City. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, but her injuries were devastating. Clarence Hughes identified her as his wife, claiming she jumped from their truck and was struck by a passing car. Tanya never regained consciousness and died 5 days later. Officially, it was a hit and run, but her friends suspected the truth was far darker. As news of Tanya's death spread, Clarence Hughes' story quickly unraveled. Her friends told police she'd been planning to escape, terrified for her life. The idea she'd travel with Clarence days before fleeing made no sense. His cold, controlled behavior raised suspicions. Tanya's death felt less like tragedy, and more like the final act of control. The official story of a hit-and-run was dealt its most significant blow by the silent testimony of Tanya's own body. The medical examiner's autopsy report contained findings that were, deeply disturbing and starkly inconsistent with a single acute traffic accident. While the catastrophic head injury was the cause of death, the examination revealed a pattern of older injuries across her body. There were bruises in various stages of healing, faint scars and evidence of past trauma that suggested a long-term history of physical abuse. These were not the wounds of a one-time event on a dark highway. They were the physical record of a sustained campaign of violence that had been inflicted upon her for years. The nature of her fatal injuries also raised serious doubts. The massive hematoma at the base of her skull was particularly telling. Medical experts questioned whether such a specific, localized injury was consistent with being struck by a car, which would typically cause more widespread and varied trauma. Instead, the injury was more consistent with a powerful, direct blow to the back of the head, as if she had been struck with a heavy object or had her head slammed against a hard surface. This finding shifted the focus dramatically. It suggested that Tanya may have been assaulted before she was found on the roadside, transforming the case from a tragic accident into a potential homicide. Furthermore, there was a curious lack of the kind of injuries one would expect from a hit-and-run. There were no broken bones in her legs, no significant scrapes or road rash on her limbs or torso that would indicate being hit by a moving vehicle and thrown across the pavement. The damage was strangely concentrated. This lack of corroborating physical evidence made Clarence's story even less believable. It was as if the scene had been staged, with Tanya's body placed on the roadside after the fatal injury had already been inflicted elsewhere. The crime scene itself seemed to be part of the deception, a calculated effort to mislead investigators. The autopsy report was a turning point. It provided the concrete scientific evidence that Tanya's friends had suspected all along. Her life had been one of brutality, and her death was likely its violent conclusion. The official cause of death remained a hit-and-run for a time, but the whispers of doubt had grown into a chorus of suspicion, now backed by forensic fact. The investigation was no longer just about a missing driver. It was about uncovering the truth of what happened in the final hours of Tanya's life, and proving that the man who claimed to be her husband was, in fact, her killer. The evidence was written on her bones, a final heartbreaking plea for justice. In the chaotic aftermath of Tanya's death, the focus of concern for many, including her friends and some officials, was her 2-year-old son, Michael. While his mother was in the hospital, Michael had been placed in the temporary custody of a loving foster family, Ernest and Sandy Bean. They quickly grew attached to the bright, charming little boy. For a brief period, Michael was in a safe and stable environment, shielded from the dark complexities of his parents' lives. However, this sanctuary was short-lived. As soon as Tanya was pronounced dead, Clarence Hughes, now identifying himself as Michael's sole surviving parent, began the legal process to regain custody. Despite the growing suspicion surrounding him and the troubling evidence from the autopsy, the system worked in his favor. At the time, Clarence was legally recognized as Michael's father on the boy's birth certificate. With Tanya gone, his parental rights were clear, at least on paper. He successfully petitioned the court, and just a few weeks after Tanya's death, Michael was removed from the Beans' care and returned to Clarence. The foster parents were devastated, expressing deep misgivings about the boy's safety. They had seen a darkness in Clarence and feared for the child. Their pleas were noted but ultimately powerless against the legal documents Clarence possessed. With Michael back in his possession, Clarence Hughes did what he did best. He vanished. He and the little boy disappeared without a trace. They left their last known address, disconnected their phone, and melted back into the shadows from which they had emerged. This sudden disappearance was the final damning confirmation for investigators that Clarence was not a grieving father, but a fugitive on the run. He wasn't just hiding from his past, he was now hiding from a potential murder investigation, and he had taken the only significant witness with him, the little boy who may have seen what truly happened to his mother. The search for Clarence and Michael Hughes intensified, but it was like chasing a ghost. Authorities now had a dual case on their hands. The suspicious death of a young woman and the abduction of her son. The tragedy had multiplied. Tanya was dead, and her beloved child was now in the sole custody of the man everyone suspected had killed her. The fate of Michael Hughes became a desperate new chapter in the unfolding mystery. No one knew where Clarence had taken him, or what his intentions were. The man who had stolen Tanya's life had now stolen her son, erasing him from the world just as he had tried to erase her. With Tanya Hughes dead and her son Michael missing, investigators faced a daunting task. They were hunting a ghost. The man known as Clarence Hughes had vanished, and the deeper they dug, the more they realized he had never really existed in the first place. They ran the name through every database imaginable, criminal records, tax filings, property deeds, and came up empty. There was no social security number, no driver's license, no legitimate history attached to the name. He was a phantom, a carefully crafted alias designed to move through the world without leaving a trace. The man who had controlled Tanya's life had done so from behind a mask, and now that mask was all authorities had to go on. The investigation became a painstaking process of backtracking, of talking to anyone who had ever had a fleeting interaction with the mysterious couple. They spoke to former landlords, neighbors, and Tanya's co-workers at the club. Each person added a small piece to the puzzle, but the central figure remained infuriatingly blurry. He was described as quiet but menacing, polite but with a temper that could ignite without warning. He paid for everything in cash, avoided having his picture taken, and was intensely private. He had built a fortress of anonymity around himself and Tanya, and it was proving to be incredibly effective at thwarting the investigation into her death. The only concrete evidence they had was a set of fingerprints lifted from the scene of Tanya's death and from the couple's last known apartment. These prints were a lifeline, a potential key to unlocking the man's true identity. They were sent to the FBI's national database, a vast repository of criminal records from across the country. In a pre-digital age, this was not an instantaneous process. It required time, patience, and a bit of luck. As investigators waited for a potential match, the trail for Clarence and little Michael grew colder with each passing day. The man was a professional at disappearing, and he had a significant head start. The case was a tangled mess of jurisdictions and unanswered questions. The suspicious death occurred in Oklahoma City, but the couple had lived in Tulsa. The abduction of Michael added a federal dimension to the case, bringing in the FBI. Yet without a true name for their suspect, the investigation was stuck in neutral. Who was this man? Where did he come from? And what other secrets was he hiding? The police were certain that uncovering his real identity would do more than just solve the mystery of Tanya's death. They suspected it would open a door to a much longer and darker criminal history, one that had allowed him to operate with impunity for years, if not decades. The breakthrough came from forensics. Fingerprints matched in the FBI's system revealed Clarence Hughes was actually Franklin Delano Floyd, a dangerous career felon and fugitive. Floyd's true identity unlocked a history of violence, manipulation, and aliases. Tanya's death was now seen as the work of a seasoned criminal, but her real name and her past remained a haunting mystery. While the FBI uncovered Floyd's dark past, another tragedy unfolded. Michael Hughes, just 6, was finally safe with a new foster family, until Franklin Floyd returned. On September 12, 1994, Floyd stormed Michael's school, armed and desperate. He abducted Michael and vanished, sparking a nationwide manhunt. Why did Floyd risk everything for Michael? Was it love or something far darker? The abduction of Michael Hughes launched one of the most intense manhunts the region had ever seen. The FBI now had a clear, high-priority target: Franklin Delano Floyd. His face was plastered on news channels and in newspapers across the country. He was officially one of America's most wanted. The public was warned that he was armed and extremely dangerous. The primary goal was the safe recovery of Michael, a little boy who had been ripped from his life for a second time by the same sinister figure. Every law enforcement agency was on high alert, and tips began pouring in from all over the nation from people who thought they might have spotted the fugitive and the child. For weeks, Floyd managed to stay one step ahead of the law, using his decades of experience as a fugitive. He moved constantly, likely using a series of stolen vehicles and relying on cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. But the pressure was immense. With his face everywhere, his ability to blend in was diminishing rapidly. The manhunt was a race against time, with the fear for Michael's safety growing with each passing day. Investigators knew that the longer a child is held by an abductor, especially a violent one like Floyd, the slimmer the chances of a positive outcome. The entire country held its breath, hoping for a miracle. The break in the case came nearly 2 months after the abduction. A mechanic in Louisville, Kentucky recognized Floyd when he brought in a pickup truck for repairs. The mechanic had seen the story on America's Most Wanted and immediately contacted the authorities. The FBI swarmed the location, but Floyd had already sensed the danger and fled, abandoning the truck. However, he had made a critical mistake. He had left behind evidence, and he was now on foot, his resources dwindling. The net was closing in. He was cornered, with fewer and fewer places to run. The once elusive ghost was finally becoming trapped. On November 18, 1994, the manhunt came to a dramatic end. FBI agents tracked Floyd to a laundromat in Louisville and arrested him without incident. He was taken into custody, his long run from the law finally over. The arrest was a major victory for law enforcement, but it was a hollow one. Because as the agents closed the handcuffs around Franklin Floyd's wrists, they were met with a chilling and devastating realization: Floyd was alone. 6-year-old Michael Hughes was nowhere to be found. The capture of the fugitive had only opened the door to the most dreaded question of all: where was the little boy? With Franklin Floyd in custody, investigators desperately pressed him for Michael's whereabouts, but he only offered lies and manipulation. Search teams scoured every possible location, but as months passed, hope faded. Years later, on death row, Floyd finally confessed. He had murdered Michael the day of the abduction, coldly describing it as a solution to his problems. He never revealed the exact location of Michael's body, sending investigators on fruitless searches. To this day, Michael Hughes remains missing, a heartbreaking reminder of Floyd's cruelty. The capture of Floyd brought no closure, only confirmation of the darkest fears. With Floyd behind bars, a deeper mystery remained. Who was the woman known as Tanya Hughes? Investigators and journalists, determined to restore her stolen identity, searched missing persons reports nationwide, but found nothing, her past erased by Floyd. She left no fingerprints, no school records, no trace. The case went cold, but journalist Matt Birkbeck refused to let her memory fade, relentlessly pursuing leads and piecing together her story. For years she was a ghost, her real name lost, her family unaware of her fate. The search for her identity became a mission of justice and remembrance. The investigation's most powerful clue was a faded photograph, a little girl smiling on a young Franklin Floyd's lap. It proved Floyd had kidnapped her as a child and raised her under false identities. The photo was released nationwide, but decades-old memories yielded only false leads. Still, investigators clung to the image, analyzing every detail, hoping someone would recognize her. The girl in the picture became the symbol of the case, a missing child whose name and story remained locked away. The quest for her identity revolved around this single haunting image. Decades later, DNA analysis revolutionized the case. Preserved samples from Tanya and Michael revealed Floyd was not Michael's biological father, shattering his fabricated family story. With a full genetic profile, investigators compared her DNA to national databases and used genealogical techniques to search for relatives. Genetic genealogists painstakingly built a family tree, reaching out to distant cousins for help. For the first time, science offered real hope of uncovering her true identity. The DNA was finally speaking, guiding investigators closer to the truth. In 2014, a DNA match led investigators to Jenny, whose sister Suzanne had vanished decades earlier after Floyd abducted her and her siblings. Jenny's mother, Sandra, had searched for years, never knowing her daughter's fate. DNA confirmed the unnamed woman was Suzanne Marie Savakis, stolen as a child and forced to live and die under Floyd's control. The mystery was solved, but the truth brought only heartbreak. Suzanne's family finally had answers, but at a devastating cost. The little girl in the photograph was home at last, her name and story finally restored. Suzanne Marie Savakis was a bright child whose life was stolen by Franklin Floyd. He kidnapped her, erased her identity, and forced her into years of abuse under new names. Despite her brilliance and dreams, she was never truly free. Only after her tragic death was her real name and story finally brought into the light. The world now knew her name. In death, Suzanne Marie Savakis was finally free, her memory reclaimed. Franklin Delano Floyd, a man of many lies, was finally captured in 1994, ending his decades-long crime spree. The case that sealed his fate was the 1989 murder of Cheryl Ann Comesso. Photographs found among Floyd's possessions linked him directly to her brutal death. Convicted and sentenced to death, Floyd now waits in a concrete cell. Justice at last for his victims. On death row, Franklin Floyd finally confessed. In cold, emotionless interviews, he admitted to killing Michael Hughes and kidnapping Suzanne, raising her as his own. He relished the attention, manipulating the truth, never showing remorse. For the families, his words brought answers, yet also new pain. Even behind bars, Floyd held the final pieces, ensuring he kept power over the lives he shattered. Even with Franklin Floyd's confession, Michael Hughes's body remains missing. Floyd's vague directions have led to years of fruitless searches across the Oklahoma-Texas border. For Michael's family, the pain endures. The search is a promise, an unending quest for answers, justice, and peace for a little boy who deserved so much more. Suzanne Marie Savakis' life was stolen, her identity erased by Franklin Delano Floyd. Forced to live as Tanya Hughes and Sharon Marshall, she became a ghost in her own story. The investigation finally gave Suzanne her name back, reclaiming her story and bringing closure to her family. Through the memories of loved ones, Suzanne's spirit endures, her story now a symbol of resilience and remembrance. Suzanne Savakis' tragic story is not just about one man's evil, but a system that failed her at every turn. Missed warnings, ignored red flags, and bureaucratic gaps let Franklin Floyd control her life. Her case is a haunting reminder of the urgent need for vigilance, reform, and compassion. Ultimately, the legacy of Suzanne Marie Savakis is one of profound sadness, but also one of enduring strength. It is the story of a life stolen, but a memory that could not be erased. Her journey reveals the darkest corners of human cruelty and manipulation, but it also shines a light on the power of persistence, truth, and remembrance. The world may have failed Suzanne when she was alive, but in telling her story, we ensure that her memory lives on, serving as a powerful warning and a call to action. She is no longer just the girl in the picture. She is a woman whose name we know, whose life we mourn, and whose spirit we honor by seeking justice for others like her. Remembering Suzanne means acknowledging the full scope of what was taken from her. She was a daughter, a sister, a mother, and a brilliant young woman with dreams of reaching for the stars. She wanted to be an aerospace engineer. She had earned a full scholarship to college. She possessed a fierce intelligence and a quiet resilience that allowed her to survive for as long as she did in an unimaginable nightmare. Franklin Floyd stole that future from her, but he could not steal the essence of who she was. By remembering her ambitions and her potential, we honor the life she should have lived, a life of accomplishment, love, and freedom. Her tragic story has also become a catalyst for conversation and change. It forces us to ask difficult questions. Could Suzanne's fate have been prevented? Are we doing enough to track missing children and combat identity fraud? How can we better protect vulnerable individuals from predators who hide in plain sight? These questions are her legacy, a challenge to us all to be more aware, more compassionate, and more proactive. Her life, though marked by immense suffering, has become a source of education, inspiring a new generation of investigators, advocates, and ordinary people to look closer and listen harder to those who may be in danger. Suzanne Savakis deserved a life filled with laughter, learning, and love. She deserved to watch her son grow up. She deserved to see her dreams take flight. While we can never give her back the life she lost, we can give her a legacy of purpose. By sharing her story, by demanding accountability from our institutions, and by holding her memory in our hearts, we ensure that her life and her death were not in vain. We remember her not for the darkness that consumed her, but for the light she held within, a light that the truth has finally allowed to shine.